as the only black member of the panel, I'm sitting here thinking, what is the correct racial etiquette these days? Do I go to you first? Do I not go to you first? We've got a BBC show, Question Time. I remember the presenter had a similar kind of topic and went to the black member of the panel for his response first. And he turned around and said, you're coming to me because I'm a black person and that in itself is racist. So I've got to be honest, I'm sitting here getting myself in a muddle, thinking to myself, goodness me, if I go to you, am I racist? If I don't go to you first, am I racist? I don't know. So can I just start with you?
You can start with me, Michelle. Good. That's all good. I know you're not racist, so no concerns here.
Your thoughts on all this?
Well, I feel vindicated because 2 years ago I said that this organization was a disingenuous scam, and it has proven itself to be a disingenuous scam. Yeah. The Black Lives Matter organization, this foundation in the USA, is a grift. They have received millions upon millions of dollars, I believe over $100 million. I think just in 2020, it was close to 100 million. So this organization has been capitalizing off of unfortunate deaths and tragedies and guilt-tripping people to send them lots of money and donations, which I believe most people think is going to go to a good cause. And instead, they are paying themselves 6- and 7-figure salaries. They're flying around in private jets. They bought a $6 million mansion. They've got over, I think, what was it? It's written here. They invested $32 million in stocks in 2020 with donation money. So this is an outright scam. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's important to note that this is a semantically overloaded phrase intentionally. It refers to at least 3 different things. There is the statement, the basic phrase, Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. Everybody agrees, every decent human being around the world, across the political spectrum, agrees that Black Lives Matter because all human lives matter and should be treated with respect and dignity. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is the organization or organizations. I think in the USA, this one we're referring to is the primary Black Lives Matter organization. And a lot of people don't know that there is an organization with founders, with people who are receiving the money. It's a nonprofit, and they've been raking it in. They've been raking in the money over the past few years. And as we've seen here, they have been spending it on enriching themselves. And it's essentially money laundering. I think what they've done here is most likely illegal.
Yeah, so I have to say that they would say in their own defense that they've not done anything wrong.
Well, anyone can look at these articles and these numbers here. Paid the baby father $970,000 for creative services, paid the brother the $840,000 for security. Fellow director got $2.1 million. This is all just in 1 year.
Mm. But then, right? So Emma, the challenge is because every decent individual, which hopefully is the majority of people, want to see racism stopped and ended. And when something comes along, and I think this whole kind of Black Lives Matter, it is like now a complex web of you've got different charities, foundations. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it's a hashtag. For others, it's a slogan, movements, whatever. And it has all become this kind of ball of if we take BLM as... Well, let me ask you this. Do you think even the BLM thing is tarnished? Is it still a trustworthy brand, if you like, when it comes to the fight against racism? Zuby's shaking his head.
It never was.
I think it's really important that you separate the concept of Black Lives Matter as a campaigning phrase, a positive campaigning phrase. The simple conception that Black Lives Matter and that saying separately Black Lives Matter is important when, particularly in America, and too much of the importation of some of this to the UK, where we have very different structural elements in racism, and it's completely different. And when we import an American attitude towards racial relations, it's actually very unhelpful because we have very different struggles and different attitudes. From what is an organisation that does not, on the surface and from these stories, appear to be well managed or managed in such a way that is doing what it is set up or supposedly set up to do. I think it's really, really important that we don't lose sight of the important conception of what Black Lives Matter should be about from the organisational failures. And this is something that happens, and I'm somebody who works a lot with the third sector, the voluntary sector, and campaigning organisations to think about how campaigning can be done well. And the best way of campaigning is to put yourself out of business. If you can get to a point where what your charitable objective is achieved, then you should be putting yourself out of business.
Well, unless you Stonewall, but that's a whole different topic. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Unfortunately, an awful lot of time what happens is that the organisations become too big to put themselves out of business, and their objectives snowball and they go in completely different directions, or they become untouchable, ungovernable. The individuals and the behaviours of an organisation become inseparable from the campaign aims of an organisation. And actually those two things should be very separate. And any good campaigning organisation should be as self-critical as possible rather than self-defensive as possible. Because it's only by continually saying, are we doing this as well as possible? Are we putting ourselves out of business? That you can actually achieve a campaign goals and aims rather than maintaining an organisation.
I'm keen to come back on that, but Harriet, I'm conscious you've not come in. What's your thoughts?
Well, I would think this is something that's been happening more and more, and it is very sad. I mean, we've seen this with identity politics, exactly the same thing. At the beginning, every right-minded person believes, Black Lives Matter and that trans men and women should have equal everything with everybody else. And yet both have been taken over in the same way and actually used to cause division and hatred and violence. And both, I think, have been run almost as extortion rackets.
Yes.
That we have to pay lip service, otherwise, you're going to lose your reputation, you're going to lose your career. And it's very, very sad the way this has happened. And it's actually promoted, great distress and not brought about the good things that we were led to expect it would.
Yeah, because Zuby, one of the things that I find, I don't like it actually, is being told, right, unless you take your Instagram and put a black square on this time and this day and leave it there, then you are a racist. And as for you, unless you take the knee at all your football matches, your Formula One, whatever it is, then you're a racist as well. And I really reject that, actually. Why are you scrunching your face up? You don't think that happens?
I think there's a spectrum here, and we're talking about two very extreme ends of it. And I actually think most of it exists in the middle of that spectrum. On the taking of the knee, I think it should be an individual's choice to do it. But I think when people do it, some of the criticism they face is as extreme as some of the criticism that those who criticise them for doing it face. And I don't think either of those is helpful to the ultimate aim.
I think
it's perfectly fair for a Premiership footballer to say, I'm going to take the knee because I feel solidarity and I feel like it's really important that I do this. And they shouldn't be penalised for that. Then other people can say, that's not my choice, and I shouldn't be penalised for that either.
Yeah.
Zuby?
I think it's very clear, even from this conversation, and all the conversations, every time BLM comes up, is that it is divisive. It's divisive. This is stoking racial tension, not just in the I mean, it's crazy it's been imported to the UK, but in the USA, it's exactly the same. You had cities on fire in 2020. There was so much tension. Multiple people got killed. Over 20 people got killed in the BLM protests and riots in 2020. So this started from one black man getting killed, and then you've got another few dozen getting killed.
But Zuby, some of these organisations, they'll say to you, but Zuby, you are oppressed, and we're here to help you.
I'm not oppressed. They're not there to help me, and they're not helping me. They're not helping black people in general. They are helping themselves. The way you stop racism is by people not being racist. It's not by calling everyone racist. It's not by making false and unkind accusations against everyone. It's not about virtue signaling and putting up hashtags and black squares and kneeling down. It's about simply treating people as equals. That's all it takes.
And do you buy into, in this day and age, because there is a suggestion that in the here and now, in this day and age, that many aspects of society, whether it's institutions or whatever, are fundamentally racist. Do you think that that is the case in today's society?
I don't think it's the case, and I don't think it's useful. these terms, systemic, structural, institutional racism, they're popular because they're these apparitions, they're these ghosts where you never need to define anything or be precise. You just say, oh, the system is racist, the institution's racist. You can just throw it out there and people just nod and cheer, but you can't fix a problem like that. If you want to deal with individual instances of racism, you need to be able to identify them, highlight them, and then you can deal with that individual issue. If you just say, oh, the whole thing, the whole system, the whole country, top to down, is racist, then that doesn't help anyone apart from the activists.
Yeah, because it's almost what constitutes or what people want to say constitutes racism. It's like the bar is getting lower or seems to be getting lower and lower. Like the example I just gave to you, a presenter going to the black person on the panel first, which I would have thought actually was a respect thing, because if anyone's likely to have a lived experience, as the phrase is, more so on this topic, it would be you rather than anyone else. The fact that I've even got to sit there for a moment, I think, oh, God, should I be going to you first or shouldn't I be going to that first?
See, and this shows what this has all done, because I imagine a few years ago, that wouldn't even have crossed your mind.
I would have come to you out of a respect
thing. It wouldn't have crossed your mind, but they've created this whole context where people don't even know what they can do. They feel uncomfortable. They've been teaching people from children to adults that they've all got this inherent racism in them and that we shouldn't be colorblind and everyone should be seeing color and all of that. And it's regressive. It's not progressive at all. It's moving people backwards.
What worries me, and I have family members of many different colors, I think it's so high. I think it's exactly what Michelle and Zuby were just saying. I think there are two things that concern me. One is this promotion that there is one black way of thinking about these things. And I think that in itself is a really problematic thing to think, because it just says, you know, the idea that the billions of people across the world that are of a different race have one mindset is in itself, for me, racially simplistic in a ridiculous way. And I do, when I'm thinking about change and how change happens, I think the problem we have is now we are too worried to question and ask questions. We're worried to say, is this the right thing to do? And I don't know how else you learn how not to do bad things than by saying, is this the right thing to do? Now, I struggle, and I know that I don't always get things right, but I hope that I come from a place where when I've got something wrong, I can learn from that rather than just simply either retreating into my own shell and saying, well, I'm not interested in learning, or being told you can never learn and you are just wrong. And we've got to find that common ground, that happy medium space where we can learn together.
I think it just comes from people being decent and charitable and empathetic, right? I think we live in this time where people like to use all of these different topics as weapons, right? People want to be able to jump in. And I can understand why some people revel in it, because it's quite easy to do. You see this in some of the modern branches of feminism. You're seeing this with people who are doing it with race. People did it with the whole COVID situation, right? Anyone who dissents is anti-science and an anti-vaxxer and hates people and wants to kill grandma and so on.
So you make money from it. I mean,
make
identity politics, I mean, Stonewall have made so much money. And it's, when you follow the money, it's really quite interesting who's making money from it and how they're making money from it.
I've got to say, Zuby, there's an awful lot of love, respect. A few people saying they think they do love you, actually.
There's a cue, ladies.
There's a lot of love for you coming through, because I think that people, it's refreshing to hear an alternate perspective on this, because for a very long time you have been told, and I do stand by what I've just said, you have been essentially told, if you don't change your Instagram black, then you're a racist. If you don't take the knee, you're a racist. And it's all well and good you say, oh yeah, well, you can choose to take the knee. Of course you can choose what you do. But if you choose not to do that for your own personal reasons, then you will be vilified by many in society.